Hello everyone, it is me, Ash, here to dive into another movie and pick apart its insides as we take a look at what it all really means. Today we look at one of the seminal film works of both the 1970s and the horror genre as a whole, which is Nicholas Roeg's vision of grief and violence, and of course that one particularly intense sex scene everyone remembers it for, Don't Look Now. It's a lasting piece of cinematic history, but it's also a bewildering watch at best, creating a story through symbolism and visuals rather than outright conversation. By taking a more impressionistic approach to his movie than the norm, Roeg gives us a story that has an undeniably chilling atmosphere, builds upon hard cuts and interwoven scenes that suggest something far larger and darker at play than the surface narrative we're given. Whilst it works excellently in establishing a creepy, brooding tone, it doesn't do wonders for helping an audience get what the ending really means. Especially when said ending is a random maniacal dwarf woman appearing full Twin Peaks style and hacking Donald Sutherland in the neck. Before we get ahead of ourselves though, we need to explore exactly what moments lead up to this, and how one little girl's death was the pivotal point that sent the Baxter family on a winding downward spiral. Christine Baxter is the beating heart of this story after all, decked out appropriately in a blood-red rain mac that endlessly haunts our protagonist, sending a message from beyond the grave that might require a bit of translation. I am the ghost whisperer Ash from What Culture, and this is Don't Look Now. What does the ending really mean? The general premise of Don't Look Now is the attempts of grief-stricken couple John and Laura Baxter attempting to reconnect and thrive in the wake of losing their daughter, who drowned in their garden pond whilst the pair were unaware indoors. A few months later, architect John takes on a job in Venice to restore an old church, where he and his wife try to find some solace in the new environment and move on from the tragedy that defines their continued existence. Everything appears to go well initially until the pair meet two old women, Wendy and Heather, of which the latter has psychic abilities and claims to see Christine in the afterlife. John begins to have continued experiences with seemingly supernatural visions, witnessing Christine's red raincoat around the watery city and slowly coming to believe in the two women's tales as ardently as his desperate wife does. His mistake, however, comes when he tries to pursue the coat, resulting in his violent death at the hands of a stranger. Whilst this film might not feel like it makes sense with this completely jarring ending initially, Roeg has seeded crumbs throughout the film as to what actually can be perceived as happening by the time we witness a murder. The most important factor to take into account then is from Heather's claim that John also has a psychic ability early on in the movie. When speaking with Laura as the trio meet in the cafe, she tells her he has the gift. That's why the child was trying to talk to him. He has the gift. Even if he doesn't know it, even if he's resisting it, it is a curse as well as a gift. Just like the mysterious Heather, John has the ability to see beyond his spiritual constraints and into the afterlife, bringing with it a series of premonitions that at first appear to be his daughter attempting to communicate a message. His inability to control or accept this sixth sense is what renders these apparitions so confusing to him as well as the audience, as we're watching through a viewpoint and experiencing his fractured vision of both the natural and supernatural in one. If we look at the very first time that John experiences a premonition, which is arguably the drowning of Christine, we watch as John jumps out his chair and runs out to find Christine submerged under the water as if he sensed something was already wrong. He gets no warning from his son, Johnny, and his wife is distracted as she meanders around their sprawling home. Instead, a strange sense of knowing fear crossing his face that leads him exactly to the terrible fate of his daughter in the middle of their property. He then tries and fails to save her, which we can insinuate as him not quite understanding his own psychic powers in time, as he couldn't muster them up and recognize them quickly enough to have a tangible effect on this tragic outcome. He knew something was wrong, yes, but not what or the urgency of it, and failed to harness his unknown powers in a way that could actually change anything, which is the rest of the story in a nutshell, really. As a result, throughout the rest of the film, he is haunted by the colour red, the same red of Christine's raincoat that she was strangely wearing on a day of clear skies, ironically not saving her from a watery death at the bottom of their residential pond. Whilst this is both a representation of the Baxters' grief at losing a child and the constant reminder of her death, it is also potentially a supernatural reminder that Christine isn't gone, and has unfinished business with her father that she is trying to save. Christine's death itself feels almost premeditated, unavoidable in its sheer accidental tragedy, then made all the more suspicious by how quickly it happened and how little anyone could help. Considering yellow is the normal colour for a raincoat, that Christine's is red feels especially pertinent. The colour of passion, of blood, and of course, of danger. Don't Look Now goes into its supernatural territory, showing a strange figure in red appearing and disappearing at will throughout the watery walkways of Venice. This is interpreted as Christine's ghost, who communicates with Heather that there is a great danger for John in Venice, resulting in those around him trying in vain to get him out of the country. Eventually, though, instead of his lost daughter, it is revealed that a strange, small woman is the owner of the map. She even shakes her head in a violent no when John finds her telling him how wrong his assumptions have been that she was his daughter before driving an axe into his throat. She is the serial killer that has been rumoured to be stalking the canals of the country, and he's found her out in some self-fulfilling prophecy that has driven him to his own death. Of course, this woman is wearing the same coat he's seen throughout the film and is the culmination of the danger he's been rumoured to be in since arriving. It begs the question, was Christine's death just a random accident, or was it a physical manifestation of the warning John has been signposted for potentially his whole life? Arguably, it is no coincidence that she's wearing exactly the same colour coat as the one his daughter did on the day of her death. If we take it a step further, throughout the film we've only ever been shown John's powers in relation to the premonition of his own murder. He doesn't quite have the same reach and power as Heather. While she can communicate with the dead and has a clear line to her psychic abilities, John's only relate to his own fate. What if the whole film in itself, everything from Christine's drowning onwards, is all a part of the warning? It would explain why she was wearing a coat on a sunny day and why her death was so still and silent, submerged face up in the water rather than looking as if there was any sign of a struggle. It would explain why she drowned in a pond in a watery link to Venice's own city and didn't suffer any other type of random accident, as well as the iconic red of her Mac in the boldest, most obvious sense of a warning. It also explains why she dies as a child, a replication of the stature of the dwarf woman that ends up as John's last waking memory. John doesn't have wider psychic abilities, just one premonition of his death, and his whole life has been interwoven with his final moments as his own timeline folds and collapses in around itself. The snapshot we get to see of the Baxter's existence has plenty of ominous inclusions of red to reinforce this too. From the blood-like spill appearing across a photograph of a church that spells out his doom in Venice Cathedral, to the cardinal's hat as he acts as an overseer to John's last project, with red becoming more and more frequent the closer he gets to his own impending doom. His brilliantly red blood spills on the cobblestones of Venice's old stonework, and his wife, Wendy and Heather, ride on a funeral boat across the canals in a moment of finality to his story. It's the same image he'd had a vision of earlier in the movie when reporting his wife as missing to the police, confused by his prescience into believing she was still in Venice rather than at home with her son. It's an amalgamation of the future and the past that is impossible to read for the untrained psychic John as it tumbles around him. We can also look at his face-off with the dwarf as an interpretation of the Baxter grief, and how John's refusal to accept or deal with the loss of his daughter personally came back to bite him at the end of the film. He spends all his time running after what he believes to be Christine and never takes any steps to actually deal with the anguish thrust upon him. Where Laura finds a comforting way to deal with her emotions, no matter how healthy it actually is talking to psychics, John spends his time refusing to open up. That he takes a job in the most water-ridden country possible seems like self-flagellation and a closing off to his emotional needs to surround himself with images of death that he never actually processes. To chase the last residual image of her and find out that it is death itself for him is poetic. The overwhelming feeling of his grief taking over at long last and spilling out with the last of his blood. If we consider that the serial killer had previously only killed women by drowning, that John dies by a sharp instrument feels all the more poignant as the break in that cycle, and reminiscent of John's own break in the cycle of his distance from his own emotions. So there you have it. Don't Look Now is one extended psychic look at the end of one man's life and all the warnings he receives that it's going to happen. But what do you think about the ending? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. I've been Ash and this has been What Culture. Make sure to subscribe to the What Culture YouTube channel for more lists like this, and don't forget to visit whatculture.com for daily news and articles. Thanks for watching.